Today we are going to discuss the topics constructors and self-keyword, which are the continuous topics in a OOPS concept. Already we discussed some topics in a OOPS, that is object-oriented programming. Okay, so what is class, what is object, what is attribute, okay, so what is a method. So these four are the four pillars for the OOPS concept. So in a continuation to that OOPS four pillars, so these constructors and self-keyword, very essential components in a OOPS concept. So let me tell you, so how these constructors and self-keyword will be used. So actually, in a traditional programming, we have the concept of variables. Okay, simply we can create a variables and we can assign different values to the variables. But here we don't have separate concept for the variables. So then how to supply the values? So how to supply the values means by using constructors only. Already I told you. So this object-oriented programming is very different from the traditional programming. In a traditional programming, we have loops, conditions, variables, methods, different functions, file operations. Okay, so many concepts we have. But this OOPS concept is related to the real world programming. Okay, so real world programming. So we don't have any loops, we don't have any conditions. Okay, we don't have any variable concept. So then how to supply the variables? Okay, how to supply the variable means by using the constructors only. Okay, so by using self-keyword, we supply different values to the program. Okay, so here constructor, one constructor, very important constructor is there. So different constructors are there. So one of the most used constructor is the init. Init means initialization. Init means what? Initialization. Okay, so what it will do means like a variable declaration. Initialization means it automatically initializes some variables and some parameters to the program. So by using the parameters only, we pass the values, okay, to the function body. Okay, how we declare variables? So in the similar way, we use this constructor. So one of the most utilized constructor is the init. Init means what? Initialization. By using this constructor, we initialize different values, okay, different parameters, okay, different objects will be initialized here. Okay, once see the screen, so just it bridges the gap between static blueprints and dynamic memory. Okay, so blueprint means what? So class is like a blueprint. Okay, it doesn't have any memory. Okay, so what have the memory? Objects have the memory. Objects have the variables. Okay, so in this object, to create different values, to store different values, we use this init. Okay, so what it will do? It supplies the actual values to the class. Okay, class doesn't have any memory, but it has the original function name. Okay, when we call with the class name, so the original body have different parameters like objects, attributes, and methods. Okay, so in the attributes and in the what we call methods, we have to work with some values. So how those values will be supplied? By initializing the program only. So how to initialize? By using the keyword. So that is initialized. Okay, double underscore init and double underscore. Okay, so just bridges the gap between. So just a static class to the original memory. Okay, it interlinks between blueprint to the original memory. Then the memory of values supplied to the class function. Okay, then only the program will execute so smoothly. Okay, just this is the how initialization will be used. Okay, next we can see where actually we use this initialization. So see, this is the one example for the class. Okay, so class student. Student is the class name. Student is what? Student class name. So define init. So here we are using one constructor, that is init. So what is the use of init? It initializes the parameters. So what are the parameters we have inside the init? Self, name, marks. Okay, already I told you. So here self, name, marks are like a variable names. Okay, so here we don't have any separate section to declare the variables. So where we have to declare? In the initialization. So in the constructor part, we have to declare the variables. So which holds the actual values in the memory. Okay, then so next slide. Self dot name is equals to name. Self dot marks is equals to marks. So here there is a difference between init and self. Okay, so these two are different keywords. So init is for the initialization. So self is the current object. It deals with the current object only. Okay, so here these two are the keywords. So init always called in the self. Self is used to call the current object. So we can observe that. So here self is the one keyword, that is not a parameter. We have to remember that. So name and marks are the parameters, original parameters like a variables. So self is not a variable, self is not a parameter. So it is always indicates that the current object. So in which object you are working, in which object you are declaring, in which object you are calling. Okay, so we start with the self. Okay, so after initialization, so this is the self keyword. So it is refers to the current object. Self is refers to the current object. It is not a parameter. So here name, marks, and etc. Whatever after the self, we have some name. Those are the parameters like a variable. Self is not like a variable. So here self is used to what we call related with the object name. So here name is the object and marks is the object. Okay. So here student is the class. Name is one object and marks is another object. Okay. Self is related to the current object. So what is the first line of object? So that is the name. So here this self is related with the name. So in which self is related with the marks. Okay. So like this self is associated with the initialization for the corresponding object only. Okay. So I think this is very difficult to understand. So because until now we see traditional programming. Okay. So it will take some time to understand. So what is class, what is object, okay, how to execute these object oriented programming. So just this is like a starting. At the starting definitely you will have the confusion. So don't bother about that. So after getting some more concepts, we have some more concepts in hoops programming, then you will get a clear idea. Okay, just this is the starting. So some concepts we are discussing. So after completion of these concepts, so you will get the total blueprint. So then you are able to create a one class. Okay, that class is related to the real life problem. Okay, without using any loops or without using any conditions or without using any variable concept or many methods or list tuples, so etc. So here. So this is regarding how to use the initialization. Okay, some objects with a self keyword. Okay. Next we will see different constructors. Already I told you, so different constructors are there. So two types of constructors are there. One is default constructor and one more is parameterized constructor. Okay, so we can see two examples for like a syntax. So So class test. Test is the class name. So define initialization. So that is the initialization. Only one keyword used, that is self. Okay. So in that I have print default constructor. So with the self. If we have any extra parameters, so those are parameterized constructors. Okay now. So here we have only self, no parameters. So then it is known as default constructor. So in the default constructor, always the self is treated as a default constructor with the initialization. Okay. So but in a parameterized constructor, so self is like a keyword, so it is related to the current object. So we have the extra parameters, okay, for different parameters. Okay, so different parameters we have. So then that initialization is called. So that type of constructor is called parameterized constructor. Already I told you in a previous slide. So we have different parameters along with the self. If there is only self, so that is the default constructor. Along with the self, if we have extra parameters like a name, marks, age, okay, then it is known as a parameterized constructors. Okay, these two types of constructors will be used in a different programs based on the objects, different objects. If you want to create more than one object, we should use the parameterized constructor. If there only one object in the class, we use only default constructor. No separate parameters will be there. Are you getting? Okay. So here, so we can see here you will get the only that body defined initialization will be there. So that will be executed. So here it will execute for so what is that? Self and X. So here one more print statement is there. So that is related to something value, and so for test T1 and it is for X. Okay, different execution parts will be there in a parameterized constructor. Okay, these two are different constructors. Okay. So these are related to static and dynamic. Static means okay, it is constant. Dynamic means variable. So default constructor is like a static constructor. So it doesn't have any extra parameters. But in a parameterized constructors, more than one parameters are there along with the self keyword. So it varies. For different objects. The output will be executed for different objects. Okay now. So because we have different parameters. Okay. So here explanation is regarding self keyword. Already I told you. So self keyword acts as an integral moving vehicle for the object data. Okay. So whatever object we create, so that particular object will be decided by the self keyword. So actually this is for the current object only. Okay. So here one example is there. So if we use self, okay. So name. So if we use self dot name, so it is related to the name object only. Okay. We have more than one or more objects. So whatever. So whenever we are using self, so it decides the which objects, in which object we are. Okay, so in which object we are. So that particular object will be decided by the self keyword. Okay, so some self is a direct reference to the current object. Already I told you, know. So object is like an instance of class. Object is like an instance of class. Okay, it must be the first parameter in every method inside a class. Used to access the instance variable and methods. It is not a reverse Python keyword, but it's strict naming convention. Okay now. So one more point is there. So this self keyword not only for object names, so it is also for the methods. So we use different functions now. So for the functions also, this self keyword will be used. So why this self means while accessing the different objects, this self will be used. Okay, self dot name. Self dot name means only name object will be accessible. Okay, without this self, we can't access the objects. Okay, I think you got the point. So by initializing the self keyword to the different objects, so at a particular time, so at any time, if you want to access a different object, we need to initialize, we need to access it with the self dot followed by object name, or self dot followed by method name. So then that particular object will be accessible. Then different execution will take place. Okay. So next, what will happen without self and with self? So clear picture is there. So here without self. So here we not used the self. Only name is equals to name. Okay. So it doesn't allocated with any memory. So it doesn't goes where actually the object is. Okay. It doesn't know. So where to go. So path may not exist without self. Okay. So here with self directly it goes to the particular object. Okay. So what we call, so if you want to go particular address, so we may start with what is your locality. So India, state, okay. So then district, then village. So some procedure is there now. So without deciding India or other country, so how we can identify our address? Okay, in a similar way, if there are number of objects, so with the self keyword, to go to particular object, so the self decides the path. Okay, now, so without self, it doesn't know where the object is. The location of the object doesn't know known to the program. Okay, now, so with the self, so it goes to directly the location of the object. Okay, now, so like self decides the correct address. Self decides the correct address of the object. Without self, so the program don't know the correct object address. Okay, now, so like this we use self. There is some example also there. Data flows securely from the call stored into the object memory via self. Okay, so then the further action will be also there. Not only access. Okay, after completion of some process, so the final values also placed into the correct object. Okay, now, so not only the accessing. After accessing, some process will be done. After process, so you will get some final output. So then the final output will also should reach the correct object. So that can also done by the self keyword. Okay. So that is in the form of a safe way. Okay, now. So in a safe protected way. So it will reach to the memory correct location. Okay. That can also done by data flow. Okay. So the data flows securely from the call stack into the object. So reverse also it will. Some initializations, automatic actions are there. Okay. So do you understand what is init and what is self keyword? Okay. Further we have some concepts like inheritance. Okay. Next encapsulation. Okay, next polymorphism. Okay, next abstraction. Okay, so while dealing with the groups concepts, already some topics we done. Okay, like a class, object. Okay, next attribute. Next one more what? Method. So today we discussed the constructor init. Okay, one more self keyword. Okay, along with this we have some more concepts. Okay, so like inheritance, encapsulation, polymorphism, and abstraction. Okay, so these concepts are also very important. So to understand the OOPS concept. Okay, OOPS concept not at all complicated. So after completion of these basic concepts, so we get some idea about this OOPS. Okay, so then you are able to construct some basic class. So which is related to the real world problem. Okay, thank you.